Before we move ahead to Sunday, would like to get your thoughts looking back on last Sunday and the performance of your rookie quarterback. Now that you've had a chance to analyze all the tape and pore over everything, how do you feel like Dak performed in that game?
Well, I thought he was really solid. Anytime you're starting a rookie quarterback on that type of stage, AT&T Stadium against the New York Giants on Fox prime time, I thought he really stepped up and played really solid. He didn't do anything that hurt us along the way. He made some solid plays. We all know one thing: he's only going to get better in terms of making a few plays. And at the end of the day, if you were to get moving away from Dak, the biggest disappointment, and I wouldn't necessarily say disappointment, but the one thing we got to do moving forward is, when you make those long drives and you possess the ball like we did, you need them to end in a touchdown rather than a field goal. And so, I know everybody's aware of that, whether it's our head coach, Jason Garrett, whether it's Scott Linehan, whether it's Dak or the rest of that offensive football team. That's at the end of the day, that was the difference. I think other than that, we played an all-around solid football game, and, we just needed to convert a few of those drives with touchdowns, and that probably would have been the difference at the end of the day.
Obviously, you guys know how good Des Bryant is. You guys gave him the contract. You drafted him. You know better than any of us. And the entire Cowboy Nation watching that game going, are you kidding me? 1 catch for 8 yards to Des. So I imagine you guys felt every bit of that frustration that the fan base was feeling. But obviously, you're in the middle of this thing. And so how do you deal with that? After the game, how do you, as the COO of the Cowboys with you and Jerry, how do you guys address getting the ball to Des more?
Well, first of all, he had opportunities. I don't think there's any denying that. Unfortunately, I think Des is, is always at the center of attention when it comes to catch, no catch in the end zone. And certainly had a great opportunity there. I think if, he's inside the lines, I don't think they overturned that ball, but I think they saw it moving, although I think his hand was under it as he slid across the white line. But, at the same time, he had a couple of other opportunities. And, should we do a better job? I know that's the focus of our offensive staff, but he did have opportunities there. We're going to continue to try to be creative and will be creative in trying to give him more ops because he is just a really good football player. He's prepared himself this year. I think he's ready, to take that big step and make great plays for us. We just got to put him in a position more often to do some big things for us.
Stephen, there's a lot of things that go into this, especially knowing you have a rookie quarterback for the next several games at least. But do you guys feel like you're being creative enough with your offense, or do you have to be less creative because it is a rookie?
I think we're good. I mean, I think we played a solid football game. If anything, you could say, okay, let's be a little more aggressive in the red zone because I don't think there's any way to be overly critical of the way we possess the ball, and we had good, long, solid drives. I think at the end of the day, if you're going to say, hey, where can you do better, it's converting those red zone opportunities into touchdowns. And, at that point, should you be more creative? I was actually having a visit with Tony, and, of course, that's unfortunately where it does get difficult. You get in that red zone, the spaces get shorter, the windows get tighter, and you've got to come up with the right situation there to get the ball in the end zone. But I think we can do that. And I think Dak also brings some things to the table that we can do to, put some pressure on the defenses. But, I think other than those red zone opportunities, if we do that a little better against a really solid New York Giants defense, then we come away from that game feeling a little better. But we got to do better. There's no question about it. We're getting ready to go into a tough environment there in Washington, D.C. I know they're going to be geared up. They had a tough opener as well. And, we're going to see what we can do. We feel really good about this football team. I think it will only get better as we move down the road. And I think everybody will improve from the Giants game to the Redskins game.
And for Dak specifically, that was his first chance to really be tested in a regular season game, and now he's seen what defenses are going to do, and they're basically going to say, we're going to load the box, and let's see if you can beat us. So for a guy like Dak, to have a conversation with him now this week, what advice would you give him for when he gets up to the line of scrimmage and there's an 8 or 9 man box?
Well, I probably don't need to give him any. I'm sure he's getting an earful from Jason Garrett and Scott Linehan and Wade Wilson and Tony Romo, and I know he's getting a lot of good advice there. I think the big thing that I would tell him, if I did say anything to him, somebody has a lot of confidence in you. And I think he just needs to go out there and cut and shoot and be the great football player that I think he can be. And I do think that our coaching staff and our players are going to put him in a position to make the plays that we need to win a football game.
It's talking to Stephen Jones here on the Ben and Skin Show, 105 through the Fan. The easiest thing to do in the world of sports is to look at things that didn't work out for somebody and then after a game go, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do this? But I'm curious in terms of, trying to do some different things to get pressure on the quarterback. Was there a worry in doing that against the Giants because they do have so many good wide receiver weapons, big play type guys? And do you feel some of that same sort of pressure playing a team like Washington with good weapons?
Well, I just think, you have to respect a guy like Eli Manning. I mean, he's got 2 Super Bowls under his belt. He's got, as you say, some really good weapons. But at the same time, I think the best way to get any quarterback to struggle is to get pressure. And so there's no question in my mind we have to continue to improve. I think we excuse me, guys.
Bless you.
I think we had a great I think we did a really nice job in terms of getting some pressure and making some plays. But we have to get better. And I think we will improve against the Redskins. But I don't think you can sit back and say, oh, my gosh, they have these weapons or they have this. I think we have to continue to get creative and have our young people continue to improve and get pressure on quarterbacks if we're going to have success on defense.
Man, it was great to see Romo out on the sideline. I didn't know if he would be able to even attend that game, but that was just good to see, and you love his ability to be there and talk to Dak if Dak wants to talk to somebody or if Romo wants to give him some insight there. Like you said, obviously there's a lot of people talking to him, so I'm sure they're careful about that. But as you look at the rest of the schedule, if you had to guess, are you thinking that Tony Romo comes back Week 8 to play the Eagles?
Well, I'm not a soothsayer here. I know one thing: there's not a more competitive man in the building than Tony Romo, and no one would like to get back and help his football team more than Tony. At the same time, he knows he's got to do the right thing, or he could come back and be right back where he is. So those are things that our trainers, our doctors, and certainly Tony are going to have a big hand in. He's been diligent, with his rehab and doing all the things that he needs to do. There's no question in my mind that he's keeping his mind football sharp and obviously along the way trying to do anything and everything he can, not only to help Dak but to help our coaches, whether it's Scott or Jason, in terms of input into a game plan. And, I know it's a frustrating time for him, but at the same time, he wants to do everything to help us win these games. So when he does return, we've got a great opportunity to finish up this season the way that we all had expectations.
Got Stephen Jones here on the Ben and Skin Show, 105 through the Fan. What is up with Orlando Scandrick? We could see it in the game. There's been some reports that he might be questionable. Is he really struggling right now to be able to suit up and play on Sunday?
No, I don't think he's struggling. I think he's working through some things that's typical in our league, in our game. It's certainly not an easy game. At the same time, Orlando, going back to that old term, a competitor, he's played so many great football games for us. He had some things that he was working through there at halftime of the game, and he came back out, and I thought competed in an Orlando Scandrick type way. And I think he's going to be ready to go against the Redskins.
When is the next time you think that you'll learn something new about Randy Gregory's situation?
That's a work in progress, and that's something that we're all sensitive to. I know he's on a journey to try to make himself better. And certainly that journey is a lot more important than his football career. If he can get all that situated, then, his next step would be to work on being a productive player in the NFL. But, I think where we are right now, where our focus is on the guys that are here, the players that are here. We're certainly very supportive of Randy and what he's doing as he works through his situation away from the field. And certainly what we're going to worry about right now is getting ready to play the Redskins.
Well, certainly you guys are also counting down the games until DeMarcus Lawrence can get back. In your mind, how much of a difference maker is he?
We'll see. Obviously, he was a productive football player for us last year, and I think he can certainly be productive for us when he returns to the field. I think he's one of the leaders in that room. He's got a toughness to him and a physicality to him that I think our players on that defensive line respond to. And I do think when he does return that we'll be a better front. So, as I mentioned, though, right now we're worried about the guys that we have in the room to go beat the Washington Redskins. And I thought the guys did a nice job against the Giants. We have to continue to improve. We have to continue, to get better in terms of putting pressure on the opposing team's quarterback.
All right. And, we were looking at some of the, the stats from the game, and obviously the Giants' defensive line is pretty fierce, but we were trying to get a feel for how big of an issue stacking the box was versus how big of an issue it was just guys getting beat up front. And it looked like, their defensive line had 20 tackles and their safeties only had 4. So was it more of an issue of them stacking the box or just the offensive line having their hands full?
I think you got to give the Giants credit. I think obviously their defensive line, they invested a lot in the offseason on those guys. I think they did a really nice job in the game and put a lot of pressure on our offensive line in terms of whether it's the running game or the passing game. And, you got to give them credit. And we'll improve from that. We'll move forward from that. But I do think you have to give their defensive front some credit.
No doubt. And before we let you go, Stephen, can you give us an update on Charles Tapper? Do you expect to see him back on the field soon?
He is. He's working, hard to get back. I don't necessarily know that it's right around the corner. Anytime a young guy misses time like he has, you first of all have to get yourself ready to go. And then once you are ready to go, then you got to get back on the practice field and, put the time in and, really show the coaches that you can be productive in an NFL football game. And, I think right now Tapper's just trying to get himself to where he can go through a full week of practice and really do the work that Rod needs to see to show him that he can help us out in the football game.
Stephen, we appreciate the time. Good luck on Sunday, and we'll talk to you next week, brother.
Great being on, guys.
Boom. There he goes, Stephen Jones.
All right, so I don't know, Cowboys. Let's start with injuries. Is Jack Crawford the only issue we got going into this week?
Well, Jeff Swain popped up on the injury list with an ankle. They list Skandrick as questionable with a hamstring, but their designations are different this year. Questionable is not what questionable was last year. So my understanding was Skandrick was able to go through most of practice today, not an issue. They were just being careful with it, and he should play. So no one new really popped up on the report. And even now the questionables are more likely to play than what questionables were in the past. So it doesn't sound like they will be down anyone going into this game.
They signed a guy from Jacksonville, Davis, to the defensive line to bolster the pass rush. Do you think he'll play Sunday?
Bolstering the pass rush would be a good idea, I would argue. We're going to say a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, they actually got into a routine where somebody would come in on Tuesday and they were in the lineup by Sunday. I don't know if we've reached that point yet, but he's comfortable in the system. Jacksonville's system is comparable. Joe Cullen, the guy he played for in Jacksonville, used to be on Rod Marinelli's staff. They coach the same way. They read things the same way defensively. So that's not, as far as getting up to speed quickly, that shouldn't be an issue. It'll just be if they were impressed with what they saw on him in the 2 days of really strong practice they had with him. My understanding was that there was a chance he was going to come up this weekend. They were kind of sorting through and see who their inactives were going to be. But they thought he did a pretty good job, and he was under discussion as far as being part of the active roster for this weekend.
Now, before we get to what they need to do against Washington to win and not go 0-2, let's just wrap up this Giants game with a question I have for you. It's so hard to evaluate, I think, what went wrong with this game because you can go over a long laundry list of what each unit did poorly, but yet and still you had every opportunity in the world to win this game. I know a lot of people point to this defense as far as not being able to make that stop on that last drive until they had to use all their timeouts and there's only 1:10 left or whatever. It seems as though that you can say they couldn't stop the running game, but the way they lined up when the Giants were gashing them up the middle in the run in the last drive, you would think that, okay, that maybe has to point to the coach and saying they didn't have them in the right position.
Yeah, I think there's some of that, and look, you allowed 20 points and you lost the game, and this is a defense that a lot of people don't think a lot about, but this team is not constructed for its defense to win games. This team is constructed for its offense to win games for it. The inability of the offensive line to be dominant in that opener, the inability of, Dallas ran 75 plays, and they chart their explosive plays if it's a run of 12 or more yards or a reception of 16 or more yards. That is considered an explosive play as far as the Cowboys view it. They only had 5 explosive plays out of 75 snaps. New York had 5 of those plays, and I think they had 45 snaps. And so they had like 30 less snaps, and were still, or excuse me, I guess they had 54. They may have had 54. So still, the defense, I thought did a good job and really performed as well as you could expect it to perform. But this team is not constructed for the defense to be a shutdown defense late in games, and that's what's going to win it for you. It's constructed with your offense controlling the clock and doing what you need to do in close games in order to win, and that didn't happen. So when a defense only gets up 20 points against a very explosive New York Giants team, I'm not going to put too much blame on them for the loss, even though they did get gashed in the fourth quarter on the ground. I think you pointed it out. I think 61 of the 130 yards they gave up on the ground came in the final 8:18 of the game. I do think some of that scheme. I also think some of that is rotation. You saw a lot of backup guys in there when they were getting gashed in the fourth quarter. Why are your second-team guys on the field when you're getting gashed up the middle when you're trying to get them off the field to get the ball back to your offense?
The Cowboys are in Washington to face the Redskins in a pretty important early NFC East battle. The Cowboys are already 0-1 in the division. They don't want to go 0-2, and the Redskins don't want to go 0-2 at home to start the season. So what do the Cowboys need to do, Norm, to get this W?
Well, the first week's offensive game plan, I thought, went well. Even with the lack of getting the ball to Des Bryant, I thought it went well other than one factor, and that was Zeke Elliott not creating many yards through the run. Now, there's several highlight packages out there over the last few days that people have put together, edited. And, Donnie, just before we came on the air, we said, one thing that people worried about Zeke Elliott maybe want to consider is that the blocking was not good on several of his runs.
No, the run blocking, they had a bad day. And the Giants spent a lot of money on their defensive line, and we wondered, would it take a little time for them to gel and perform? And you just don't know which way it went. Was it that the New York Giants defensive line was really good, or the Cowboys offensive line? But to be the best unit by far on this team, this offensive line, but they heavily invested in it, they do have to play better. And we always talk about people stepping up and making plays defensively with the Cowboys. Someone needs to step up and get a pass rush or step up and make a play. Well, as a unit, I think this offensive line has to step up and help this team and help carry this team. They know they're deficient in other areas. You're the best unit on this team. go out there and perform to your capabilities. In this running game, if you open up holes for Zeke Elliott and Alfred Morris, maybe this game turns out differently.
I bet you have too, have gotten several emails starting with the very end of the game Sunday and progressing through the week of people saying, well, we should be giving the ball more to Alfred Morris. Wait. We've played one game. And Alfred Morris had one run of more than 9 yards. If you simply say, well, wait a minute, if a guy misses his block on that run and Morris gets stopped at the line of scrimmage, all right, then Morris has 5 carries for 20 yards. If Zeke, on one of his 0 carries, there is a block that springs him for 15, well, he winds up then with 20 carries for 66 yards. It is way too early to focus on a play or two and start saying, well, I've got to change the amount of time I'm giving to this guy or that guy. Morris's 2 good carries of the game, and that's what he had. He had a 9 and a 15, occurred on the 4th to last possession of the game for the Cowboys. And once that possession ended, people said, well, Morris should have gotten more running time. Well, in the last 3 possessions, the Cowboys ran the ball twice and threw it 14 times because of situations. Mm-hmm. Put deep in the hole by a holding penalty, put deep in the hole by another penalty. So it wouldn't have mattered if DeMarco Murray were back on the field. They'd run the ball a couple times there. So all that must be put in a game perspective. But then we should put this in perspective. That defensive tackle pairing of the Giants, of Harrison and Hankins, that's not the last time this year, Donnie, they're going to plug the middle on a running back.
No. And do you find it odd that with those 2 beefy guys in the middle that the Cowboys elected to have those running plays pretty much basically up the gut?
Yes, but I will say this. If you're the Redskins and you have faith that that pair, which weighs about 660 pounds, maybe more, that's what they're listed in that area. But if you believe that pair can stop the run, and Harrison was incredibly highly rated against the run last year, then you are free to have your ends say, if the middle is taken care of, you just don't get leveraged around the outside. And I just saw on TV, they were showing a package of Ezekiel Elliott runs on TV, and he tried to step outside one play, and he got hit in the backfield 4 yards deep by a defensive back. Think of that. The Giants were so close to the line of scrimmage that when the ball was snapped and handed off, the secondary was close enough for an unblocked defensive back to hit your running back 4 yards deep in the backfield. Holy cow.
If that's not a blitz, then that's creeping up to that line of scrimmage and saying, I am stopping the run. Do something else.
As you pointed out the other day, Pittsburgh just kicked Washington's butt up the middle the other day. I can find very little reason to think this won't be a very good afternoon to run the football.
Yeah, I like what you said at the very beginning, Norm, the game plan. But they wanted to execute the Cowboys in week 1 actually worked. Another problem is that they just couldn't punch it into the end zone. Mm-hmm. You score touchdowns instead of field goals. We are talking about, wow, all right. They controlled the clock. They scored, and the defense did enough to win that football game. So I don't think they have to change too much against Washington, because if you're going to run the football and take time off the clock, especially those first 2 drives, if they can execute things like that and score touchdowns, that's exactly the formula they want to use.
We all of us, press included, distort game 1 of the season because that's all we have. Fans panic. Fans jump to decisions after 1 possession or 2. And it is a 16-game season. Yes, it's a crying shame the club lost Sunday. But except for some veteran offensive mistakes, Beasley doesn't catch a touchdown. Dez doesn't hang on to the ball. penalty against Collins, penalty against Martin. If the Cowboys had won that game 23-20, how incredibly different is the narrative that comes out of that game? We control the ball. Mm-hmm. Our rookie quarterback made no mistakes at all in the game. We did exactly what the game plan called for. Nobody is saying to Garrett, "Oh, you were too conservative."
Actually, it wasn't. It was Philly. I think everyone gets excited about the Cowboys game and Cowboys week, but playing Philly, you knew it was going to be tough and physical, and you had to come out and be ready week in, week out.
What was one of your favorite Cowboys stories? Was there a defender you went up against, some trash talk? Did you ever run into Jerry Jones? Do you have a favorite Cowboys story that you could share with us?
I think my favorite Cowboys story would be myself and the late, great Sean Taylor coming out of the tunnel and ended up walking out with T.O. And, me and Sean was having a conversation, and all of a sudden I looked to the side and I'm talking to myself because Sean walked back and was yelling at T.O. about how much he hated him and what he was going to do to him. And I'm like, what? I'm trying to stop him. Like, man, what's going on? And, I just remember that game, Sean telling T.O., like, I'm going to hit you every opportunity I get. And you see, I think the first play of the game was a toss to the left, and T.O. was on the right, and Sean knocked him out of bounds, had no business near T.O., wasn't around the ball. So in that game, I think that's when T.O. dropped the ball downfield by itself. It's a bunch of great memories when Santana scored 2 touchdowns in 2 minutes. Us playing, it was always a challenge playing against DeMarcus Ware, knowing he was going to come off that edge, thinking I can't wait to deplete him, and him trying to make sure he stayed and hugged Chris Samuel so I couldn't deplete him. So I have a bunch of memories from those games.
Southeast Jerome, Coach Janky Spanky, Sheriff Gonna Get You, Clinton Port. Which one of those is the favorite character, Clinton?
Man, I don't even know. All of them were enjoyable. Week to week, that got us through one of our tougher stretches. I think we were 3-5 at that point when they began, and it pushed us into the playoffs.
What worried you the most from the Monday night loss against Pittsburgh? The Redskins thought to be a contender. Is Kirk Cousins for real? Is the defense that much better? What worried you the most about that Steeler game?
Well, I think not answering the question, Mark. I think the question coming into the season was our D-line against the run, and can our offensive line and team establish the run? And neither of those questions were answered Monday night. So I think I'm confident in the secondary. I think I'm confident in Kirk Cousins. But the questions of our offensive line and our defensive line still remains, and you have to win games in the trenches.
I don't know if a lot of people give you enough credit for your football intelligence and acumen. Can you break down the X's and O's for us of why a supposed shutdown corner in Josh Norman didn't follow Antonio Brown, and do you expect it to be different against Dez on Sunday?
Well, if you look in Carolina, Josh Norman didn't follow the best receiver either. He played one side of the field, and that's the same thing he's doing here. I think with the pressure of this DC media, all of a sudden that's going to change. I think Josh is capable of doing it. I actually think he wants to do it. But when you have a guy that's following the best receiver, it kind of messes up your defense. I think it's a lot of question marks on the defense, and it's hard to just say, okay, let's put Josh Norman here, and you're swapping everyone else around. Because if you look at what the Steelers did, putting Antonio Brown in the backfield and then leaking them out once the defense is set, how could Josh Norman cover Antonio Brown if he's, when he lines up on the left or right side is easy, but once he goes in motion, that becomes a problem. So you just have to figure out a way. I think Breland was capable. I think if you knew going into the game that Breland would hold Antonio Brown 8 catches for 113 yards, you would have lived with that. Before Josh Norman acquisition, Breland was going to have to check him. So if you knew going into the week, Antonio Brown is going to have 8 catches for 113 yards on Antonio Breland, as a defensive coordinator, you got to say, okay, I'll take that, because no cornerback in the NFL can stop Antonio Brown one-on-one.
Clinton Portis right here on DFW Sports Station 105.3 The Fan.
Clinton, let's get your take on Zeke Elliott, your first impressions of the 4th overall pick.
I had an opportunity to meet Zeke. I think he's a big guy. I think behind that offensive line, he's going to do miracles in the NFL. Everyone talk about the running backs in the NFL or the running game disappearing. I think Zeke behind that offensive line is going to be amazing. But what I'm also interested in seeing is Alfred Morris behind that line. I was a huge fan of Alfred Morris while he was in D.C., and I hated to see him go, especially ending up in Dallas. But just the way he runs, downhill, powerful guy, first guy never tackling him, and now he's behind that offensive line, one of the best in the NFL. I'm excited to see the combination of the both of those guys.
Take us inside being a running back, because DeMarco Murray was very patient, waited for the holes to open. Is there such a thing as being too fast as a running back that you get to the line before the hole's even there?
Well, not really. You got to know your offensive line. Some offensive line is going to be quick hitters. If you look at me in Denver, it's all of a sudden you got to know 1, 2, 3, and everyone's going to get cut. Now you make your move. Me in D.C., it was kind of, there wasn't a lot of holes, so it was like, man, just get through it, move the pile, fall forward 1 or 2 yards, and get back in the huddle, and let's try this again. So you just wanted to get to third and manageable, third and short to give yourself a chance. So it's really mindset. I think you got to have patience. You got to stay on your first read. You got to be prepared to if a guy misses a block or if someone gets pushed in the backfield. But with that offensive line you all have, it's not much patience needed. It's downhill and keep running.
Clinton, you're one of the toughest guys in the league, and Tony Romo is trying to fight through even more injuries. Do you think it's realistic for Romo to come back and play at the elite level that he has done so throughout his career? What are your thoughts on the Romo injuries?
I do think so. I think the older you get, the harder it is to return from injury. I think just that mindset alone of rehabbing constantly. People say once you become a vet, you get savvy and you learn how to take care of your body. But at the same time, you can't beat Father Time. And I think you all have a great young quarterback in Dak Prescott. I watched him a lot at Mississippi State. I think he's doing wonderful things over the preseason for you guys. And getting his opportunity now, if he can capitalize on that opportunity, I'm not sure if you really want Romo back. I think having Dak and Ezekiel Elliott, if they can pick this system up, you kind of got to move on. I think Romo has done a lot for you all, but he really hasn't won the big one like you all want him to. So this could be the start of a new era.
Clinton Portis right here, the Redskins, legendary running back on 105.3 The Fan. Your thoughts on this whole Colin Kaepernick story?
Overblown, man. It's too much attention paid to that. I think it's so many issues around America in the United States that we could focus on instead of what guys are sitting doing the national anthem, what guys are standing, what guys are doing what. All of a sudden, it's a media frenzy. Oh, let me see who's doing this, who's doing that. If the guy doesn't believe he needs to stand, that's his issue. He don't have to stand. This is America. He makes his own decision. So, I just think as a player, you go out and you do, instead of all the attention coming to you or the negativity or the positivity, highlight some of the positive stuff these guys are doing in communities all around the world. There are so many players doing so much to affect communities that they come from, communities that they never been into, and highlight that. If you highlighted all the positivity that these players do instead of all the negativity, the world would be such a better place.
Clinton, we've been going back and forth on this, to the Hall of Fame, who's in, who's out. Terrell Owens deserve to be in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, he does. I don't think you could take anything away from T.O.'s career, from San Francisco to Philly to Dallas to Cincinnati, wherever he was, he produced. I mean, when you look at T.O. Numbers, and he was one of the first to do it, you look at T.O. numbers off the field, you can't control his issues. On the field, T.O. was a grown man. He played the game with passion. He played the game the right way, and the only person that I ever seen intimidate him was Sean Taylor.
Do you think Donovan McNabb is a Hall of Famer?
In Philly, I think he did so much with so little in Philadelphia. Him and Andy Reid worked wonders. In Westbrook, they didn't have any big name receivers. They really just came out and got things done. And if you look at all the yards McNabb threw for and what he did for the city of brotherly love, he deserves it. You can't look at his 1.5 year here in D.C. like, oh, well, McNabb fell off. Okay, so what? So you have to look at his Philly numbers, and in Philly, he deserves it.
Taylor in the pocket, flushed out, moving to his right. Taylor looking downfield, sets up the long ball, separation. Greg Salas has got it. Salas to the 20, to the 10. Salas is in. A somersault to the end zone. Touchdown, Buffalo.
Yeah, but
71 yards.
But they lost. 37-31 Jets. That was the call last night on your home of the NFL 105.3 The Fan. It's Sean and RJ. And now the Bills are 0-2. Sammy Watkins is banged up. Let's bring in Mike Florio, brought to you by Clay Cooley and the Leather Sofa Company here on 105.3 The Fan. If you want to go to the fight tomorrow night in Arlington, we have free tickets. Our final giveaway coming up at 8:45. Mike, 0-2, Arizona and New England coming up. Is Rex Ryan in trouble?
Oh, he's in trouble. He was already in trouble. For whatever reason, Terry Pegula and Kim Pegula, the owners of that team, had gotten the word out before the season started, really back in January, that it's up or out this year for Rex Ryan and for GM Doug Whaley. To start off the year 0-2, to lose at home to a division rival that you have to go play at some point in their building, that is not a good way to start the season. That's not the way to ensure ongoing gainful employment. And 0-3 could be coming, 0-4 could be coming. And you're going to hear the stat, and the loser of the Cowboys-Washington game is going to hear this stat, that only 12% of the teams that start 0-2 make it to the playoffs. Now, look, one of the reasons for that is 88% of the teams that are 0-2 stink. So the question is, are you one of the 88%, or are you more like the Cowboys in '93 who started 0-2 without Emmitt Smith and then got Emmitt Smith back and ended up winning the Super Bowl?
Mike, Revis was beat again by Goodwin on a long touchdown. He was torched by A.J. Green in Week 1. There's rumors that he was just lazy in the offseason, and he's kind of paying the price for his sins of his summer. Is there any truth to that, or is he just getting old?
I haven't heard that. He had that wrist problem that limited him at times, lingering into the year. And, this is one of the reasons why you don't give a guy a contract with $36 million, $39 million guaranteed over a 3-year window. And now to have it's one thing to get burned by DeAndre Hopkins or A.J. Green or Sammy Watkins. Marquise Goodwin? Really? Ran right by him? So this storyline is going to continue, and they need to either give him help over the top, they need to move him to safety, they need to find a way to get more out of Darrelle Revis, because next year he's due to make $6 million fully guaranteed, but it's another $9 million on top of that. And I think right now the Jets would be foolish to bring him back at $15 million for next year.
Who needs this win on Sunday more between the Cowboys and the Redskins?
Probably Washington, because they're the home team and the defending division champion. And you start the year 0-2 with both losses at home, looking awful on Monday night, and then losing at home to a division rival that you have to play Thanksgiving Day in their building. You get swept by a division rival, it's so much harder to win the division. So I think Washington needs it more. I think Dallas will have a better opportunity to recover from this one than Washington. But Dallas, I've mentioned a couple of times now, losing at home to a division rival. Not good to lose at home to the Giants, but the Cowboys have done that, more often than not since opening the new stadium.
What have your different insiders said about Josh Norman not following Antonio Brown?
Well, Joe Barry, the Washington defensive coordinator, explained yesterday that it's easy to tell the player, Josh Norman, that you're going to follow around Antonio Brown. Barry's point is it's harder for the rest of the secondary to know where to line up, because Norman is being moved and Norman's in a spot where another guy was going to be, then that guy has to react and recover. I've talked to some people since then, and we're going to keep at NBC on Sunday a very close eye on what happens in that game, because the response to Joe Barry is, look, you're paying these guys a lot of money. If they're not comfortable moving around, they get comfortable moving around. And this is more about, I think, Josh Norman not being comfortable moving than it is his teammates not being comfortable with him moving. And Norman is most comfortable in that left side of the defensive formation, definitely not in the slot, and not on the right side. So you keep him in his comfort zone. And if the other team decides they're not going to line up their number one receiver there, it's not like Seattle a couple years ago. Remember when the Packers played there the first game of the season, and they came up with this bright idea that they just won't put Jordy Nelson or whoever at Richard Sherman? Well, the Seahawks have the rest of the weapons to shut you down. Washington doesn't. And part of the problem is, you go back and watch that game, D'Angelo Hall was not playing over the top as a safety to help Bashaud Breeland. They just miscalculated the ability of Bashaud Breeland to cover Antonio Brown. Yeah. And if Breeland can step up and play like Norman, then you're fine. If the rest of the secondary is the Legion of Boom, you're fine. If the rest of the secondary isn't, you better be moving your best corner to cover the best receiver, wherever the best receiver may be.
Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com. Join us here at 105 through the Fan. We were stunned. You guys have this game Sunday night, Packers-Vikings. We were stunned to see it's just a 2-point spread in favor of Green Bay. We don't even know who's starting for Minnesota. Why are people thinking this is going to be this 2-point spread game in Vegas?
Well, first of all, we know who it's going to be because Sam Bradford's been getting the reps with the first team. You know, coaches like to think that they're going to keep quiet what they intend to do with a starting quarterback by not announcing it until Sunday or Saturday or whenever. But you can't keep everybody quiet who's at practice. Right. And all it takes is one person to blab, hey, Sam Bradford got all the first-team reps. And, okay, Sam Bradford's going to start. So even with Bradford starting, I agree with you. The Packers are a much better team than the Vikings across the board. And I know the Vikings won at Green Bay to end the last regular season and win the division, but the Vikings are 2-10-1 against the Packers since sweeping the Packers in 2009, that first year that Brett Favre was in Minnesota. That's why head coach Mike Zimmer said this week, we got to win more for this to be a rivalry. They haven't won many over the last 6 years. 2-10-1 and 2 points. I mean, I'm not a betting man, but if I were, it makes me think I'm missing something if the line's only 2. But I think a lot of it is there's a lot of people out there in the betting public that believe in the Vikings, and that's what keeps that line fairly close because ideally they want equal betting on each team.
Are you confused by Jeff Fisher possibly getting an extension?
Well, I'm intrigued by the possibility, guys, that he already has one and they haven't announced it yet. That rumor emerged this week, and he was asked about it yesterday, and he just said, I don't talk about my own contractual situation. I'd like to think if that's false, you make an exception and say, wait a minute, you're suggesting that I have a contract extension that they're afraid to announce to the public because of the scrutiny that would arise? And arise it would if they did announce that he had an extension, because every time ESPN reported in the offseason that he may have an extension before the season begins, the most common reaction was, why? Right. Why would you be giving this guy an extension? And the people in St. Louis who cover football, they think this is hilarious because their position is, wait a minute, why all of a sudden is it unacceptable for Jeff Fisher to be a mediocre coach? It was perfectly acceptable when he was the coach in St. Louis. Now he's the coach in L.A. and it's not acceptable anymore?
Yeah. Did you hear Keyshawn Johnson suggest that Jeff Fisher did not want Jared Goff?
I heard that he said that.
Yeah.
And if it's not Jeff Fisher, who is it? Who in that organization has the juice to say we are trading from number 15 all the way to number 1? Because it's one thing to have the first overall pick, to earn it because you were 2-14, and we got to use it on somebody. Okay, well, who are we going to use it on? Well, I don't know. Who are we going to use it on? We're not very good. We don't make good decisions. Well, let's just pick this guy. It's another thing to say we have fallen in love with a guy, and even though we're at number 15, we are going to springboard all the way to number 1 to get him. And, you know, I don't know. Is this part of some broader power play by Jeff Fisher to keep Jared Goff on the bench to prove a point that he didn't want him? I don't know, but look, you don't move up to get the guy number 1 overall if you don't think he's going to be your starter week 1. And it's glaring to see Jared Goff in street clothes. And he may be the backup this week to Case Keenum. But look, if you're not the starter, then the team made a mistake making that move.
Of the Hall of Fame nominees that came out yesterday, who's going into Canton next year?
Oh, probably LaDainian Tomlinson.
Yep.
Kurt Warner maybe. Terrell Owens. It's going to be funny when they finally put Terrell Owens in because all the stuff they did to trash him, to justify putting Marvin Harrison in before him. How do you set that stuff aside? Well, he was a cancer on 4 different teams, and well, they couldn't wait to get rid of him, and he was this and he was that. But we'll let him in on his second try. I wish they would have just been honest. We have a waiting list among receivers, and Terrell Owens got in the waiting list, and only one receiver is getting in on the first ballot, and that's Jerry Rice. Nobody else is. Wait your turn, but some of the voters really, really called him out. And I talked to a voter last week who said, I'll never vote for Terrell Owens or Randy Moss to get in the Hall of Fame, but I think it's going to be one of those two.
Randy Moss?
Let me just jump up on
that person should lose their vote.
Let me jump up on a soapbox here for a second.
Jump.
Why in the hell is Darren Sharper one of the 94 nominees?
Because off the field doesn't matter. Well, I mean, not that he deserved it on the field.
But you talk to voters about this, and look, I try to be diplomatic because Darren Gant, who works for me at PFT, is one of the voters, and I don't want to be responsible for him losing his vote, but it's the bylaws. The bylaws. Well, who gives a bleep about the bylaws?
Do you
change the bylaws?
Do you take OJ out?
Are the bylaws written on stone tablets from Mount Sinai?
Could be. You never know.
Yes, you take OJ out. You get rid of OJ Simpson.
Lawrence Taylor?
I think you have the conversation. And see, that's the thing. The argument is, well, you know what? We let a bunch of turds in the past under these current bylaws.
So let's keep repeating the mistake. Right.
If we change them, then we're going to have a bunch of guys in there who never should have been in there, so we better not change the rules. And what that does, it causes guys to be excluded as a practical matter. I mean, Darren Sharper's never getting in.
Right.
But why is he even on the list? Why do I have to see his name in anything other than a report about what happened to him in prison last night? I mean, I just don't get it. I don't think that this should be the approach to a Hall of Fame. And yes, O.J. Simpson should not be in the Hall of Fame. Think about taking your kid to the Hall of Fame. Or here's the other possibility. You have a G-rated room with the bronze busts of all the guys who were model citizens. And then you have a PG-13 room where you take the older kids and they can learn about O.J. Simpson, Lawrence Taylor, and the equivalent of Darren Sharper, who may or may not get in or won't get in. But somebody one of these days, there's going to be a great player one of these days that does something horrible off the field, either during his career or after, and he's still going to get in, and put that guy in the PG-13 room as well.
Great stuff, Mike. We'll see you on TV Sunday night.
See you guys.
Mike Florio, Football Night in America, Pro Football Talk.
All right, this is, of course, David Moore, Dallas Morning News. So 1 catch, 8 yards, 5 targets, the much-talked-about statistical line for Dez Bryant in Game 1. My question is, just as a guy who knows Jason Garrett better than we do around here, you're there every day, I mean, does he react to this Dez situation? I mean, I know he doesn't care that this is the number one talking point of every show on this station and every Cowboy show nationwide, but I mean, is there a chance that he's not even aware that that is an issue for the Cowboys offense, that Dez Bryant needs more targets?
Oh, he'll say he doesn't react, but I would argue ever since he's been here as an offensive coordinator and a head coach, whenever an issue has become this prominent in the week leading up to a game, you always see them address it. You know, last year coming out of the first game, it was, why in the world are you throwing the ball on 3rd and 1 when you said you're supposed to, this is the team that was going to ground it out, or a couple of years ago. And then you saw them go back in that Tennessee game the next week and just ran some more. I think you're going to see a lot of that with Dez in this game. I would expect them to go to Dez early and often in this game. Now, this being said, it's all relative because Jason Garrett has a very democratic offense and how he wants to spread it around. And he doesn't want to focus on any one individual receiver and feed him the ball too much. So, but to say that Dez Bryant's only going to get 5 targets, there's no way that's going to happen in this game. It's going to be 9 to 10, which I think is still probably not going to be enough for some people.
Mm-hmm.
But you've seen this in the past too. I mean, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've come up with games where Dez has had 2 or 3 receptions and only 5 or 6 targets. And suddenly you look up at the end of the first quarter of that next game and they've thrown to him 5 times. I would expect something like that in this game.
It's a funny gag, but your friends at 538 wrote about this today.
What?
In terms of which weeks of the season are the most vital. And, of course, you have to read into that based on, all those stats that suggest, your expected wins versus what really happens, and the idea that if you're 2-0 here or if you're 1-1 here are the odds you make the playoffs. Basically what they arrived at is that week 1 and week 2 are far and away the 2 most important weeks of the season relative to, total wins for a team as it goes on and, just your ability to do something with the season. The fact that if you start 0-2, I believe you have a 10% chance of making the playoffs or something along those lines. If you start 2-0, you're up at like 61%. Now, in sports talk, you want 0% or 100%, or you don't care about a lot of these stats, especially this early in the season. So I can't help you there. It's 10% if you start 0-2, and it's 61% if you start 2-0. So neither of them are.
Is that right?
Are certain.
10%, huh?
10% of teams that start 0-2 make a run at the play, or actually end up in the playoffs. So it's a very, very difficult thing to do. The same thing.
I would imagine 10% if you're 0-2 is within your division is even more.
I would imagine. I don't think they covered that, but the point is, one of these teams is going to be 0-2 by 3 o'clock on Sunday, or 3:15. And, I mean, if you just try to be fair to your brain, you would probably say it's most likely Dallas. It doesn't mean Dallas can't win this game, because much like last week, it's two really close teams. And I'm willing to say that I don't believe that your life is on the line here, because I do see a soft underbelly of a schedule, and while you're not taking advantage of it early, that has nothing to do with your ability to take care of it as the season goes on. I would not want to be 0-2. However, I was forced to make a pick last night for the paper, and just to scoop my own scoop, which doesn't really mean anything. I can't pick the Cowboys to win this game based on all of the things I've looked at. It's one of those deals where I do expect it to come, down to the very last thing, and I do kind of call it a toss-up based on the fact that most NFL games seem to be that, and who can make those last few plays. So they make us do picks. This is one of those weeks where I have no idea who to pick, because you can make compelling cases in both ways, and when you can, I often go with the home team, or the team that seems like it's in a bigger desperation spot. And I would say Washington, having already been humiliated at home once, to go to 0-2 in home games and all that, and knowing that Washington does not have a cupcake schedule, I almost feel like Washington needs this a little bit more.
And you have to remember, when you talk about the schedule and you're looking at other teams, you're like, ooh, this is a soft area of our schedule. When the Cowboys are on someone else's schedule, that's what they're thinking. This is probably part of their soft area. This is not.
I wonder who looks at the Cowboys and says that's a game that we.
I would think the Redskins and Giant,
see, I think
they would rather be facing the Cowboys than. Well, let me look at they're obviously facing the AFC North, right?
I think every team in this division says let's split the division. I don't know if there's any team that says we got to go 5-1 in the East.
No, but I'm just saying, if you're the Redskins saying, let me look at my schedule. Okay, here's Pittsburgh. That's probably going to be a rougher one. All right, step back with the Cowboys. That's good. Even though they're a rival, and anything can happen in these rivalry games. I'm just saying, if you're thinking the Cowboys are one of the real worries on other teams' schedules, and especially outside the division, I would say, right?
I disagree with you.
If you're Cincinnati, are you saying, hey, the Cowboys are real tough?
We talk every day about this team, and every day I find that you think a lot less of this roster than I do, and that's fine. You might turn out to be right.
The only reason
I think this roster is pretty good in certain spots.
Yeah, in certain spots. One of the reasons is just their inability to win last year at all without Romo. And I look across the league, and other teams can win without their quarterback. And the Cowboys can't.
I think the Cowboys can.
Now
I think they can this year. I think they can win without. Again, talking about this team feels like looking at a painting. I really think Dak Prescott was pretty good Sunday. I really do. And I think I've seen almost no indications that he's a meltdown quarterback waiting to happen. That doesn't mean it can't happen Sunday. It doesn't mean it can't happen in 2016. But with Dak Prescott, the Prescott and this team doesn't win without Tony Romo conversations, to me, they're not as important as they are to you, because I think for whatever reason, and it might turn out to be a really good one, Prescott has been put in this bin with Kellen Moore and Matt Castle and Brandon Weeden and John Kitna and Stephen McGee and Kyle Orton and all these guys, and I'm just not ready to put him in that bin. I think he has shown me, I'm not playing favorites here. I'm not computer with Mississippi State season tickets. And on draft day, I wasn't saying run up there and get him in round 2. That's none of this. What I'm going on is just really what he's done since he's put on a Cowboy uniform and since we were out in training camp. You're just like, Every day he makes you believe a little bit more that this isn't too big for him. And I realize there are people that think he was bad on Sunday. I'm not one of them. I thought that was about the ceiling of what I expected from him. And if Dez just catches that touchdown, or maybe Terrence Williams just gets out of bounds, or maybe Cole Beasley just catches that. If one of those three things happen, which none of them were mistakes from Dak Prescott, we feel so much different about him and this team going to week 2.